I'd like to call to order regular council meeting number 1519 for Tuesday, July 14th. And in honor of the Liwatul, the village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Liwat Nation. This meeting of council is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications in order to adhere to the provincial health officer's orders respecting physical distancing requirements as a measure to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. Council members will be involved and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For those members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Members of the public who wish to ask questions during open question period at the end of the meeting will be able to do so, and I will provide instructions at that time. Council members attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting, so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. For clarity, if a council member does not verbally advise the chair but is observed to be absent from their video, they will be considered absent. Ms. Fraser, that's where my notes end. It ends at from their video, so I'm just noticed I think I'm missing a chunk.
Shall I read the rest?
Sure, because I don't have it.
Yeah. But is observed to be absent from their video feed for an extended period of time and their video feed remains turned on and it is unclear to staff whether they are present at the meeting, the council member will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the council member to reappear in the video feed. I'm sorry, apologies for that.
That's okay. It was just a couple of sentences on the next page, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting number 1518 from Tuesday, June 30th. Moved by Councillor Paddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, we don't have a rise with report or any committee of the whole. Committee minutes for information from the Mayor's Task Force from COVID-19 Response and Recovery Committee meeting number 1 from Thursday, June 18th. We'll be talking about this a little bit later. Can I get a motion to receive?
Motion to receive, Brian.
Councillor Zant, second by Councillor Noble. All in favor, opposed, motion carries. We have no delegations, so we're on to the reports from the Office of the CAO. BC Transit Reserve allocation.
Yes.
Gilmore.
So we received this last week, and BC Transit is in the process of trying to pull together all of the municipalities' annual operating agreement, and a couple of the different measures they've indicated they are able to do to help offset any cost differentials from budget due to not collecting fees during the first, I think it was 2 months, part of March and April. Was one, we could reallocate the reserve allocation, and the second one would be a lease holiday. So what you're seeing before you today is how much the village has as a remainder going into this fiscal, which starts April 1st, 2020. And the amount that we are able to allocate would be $10,697. So they're asking whether we are comfortable with allowing them to transfer that into general operations while they're preparing their annual operating agreement. And then they will share the annual operating agreement with us, to which then that will be brought forward to council for approval.
Any questions?
Yeah, just through the administrator, if I might, Mayor Richmond, what's your personal feeling on this? It seems that any reserves we have would obviously be depleted at that point. Where do you stand on this?
I think that I did go back and ask a couple of questions. I only did it this morning, so I don't have a response back. But I had a couple of concerns wondering, is there an annual amount that's going to be allocated for this year? We see that we used of the almost $89,000 that we had in the reserve, we used $78,000 last year in trying to make those the budget balance. And that's just the whole purpose of these general reserves. So I want to know, is there more? if we don't reallocate this, then we're going to need to go back to the taxpayer and amend our budget, because there could be additional shortfalls. I don't see how we aren't able to do this, but I would like to, I'm very curious as to what the annual operating agreement is going to look like and tell us where we're at, because we haven't been given any information. I feel that this is one of the best ways to help us as far as a taxpayer perspective. As I'm indicated, I wish we had some more information on this, and they would like this information by July 17th, which doesn't give us very many days.
And I guess that's my concern, if you mind, Mayor Richmond, is we're using up all the reserves. We don't know if they're going to help us out for the rest of the money that we're going to be behind. And I'm worried about us having to go to the taxpayer for potentially multiple tens of thousands of dollars to make up the difference. And that's a big concern for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, you know, I mean, I think the request or the idea of putting to $10,000 in reserves towards this past deficit, it makes sense. And as the CAO said, that's sort of why we build reserves in this silo. But I totally agree with both of you. It would be really nice to know if within this next AOA that we have coming, whether that includes a new reserve allocation being put away, so that we don't find ourselves in a pickle 6 months or 12 months from now. So, but I, you know, so I agree. I personally, I'm ready to support the $10,000 because I think we need, you know, it makes sense. But I look forward to getting more information on that.
I'll move the recommendation to allocate the $10,697.
Seconder,
Second.
Councillor Noble. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So next up is a report on our Mayor's Task Force on Response and Recovery. An update on that. I believe Ms. Brooksbank, there she is going to join us. I'm going to, actually, I'll wait for a second here until she's on. Hello.
Oh,
Hi, Jill.
I'll be turning it over to Ms. Brooksbank in a second to sort of give all of us an update on what's been done so far. There's been a lot of work put in. I'll just say that you know, every time I come off, whether it's a planning or an actual meeting from the task force, I feel quite charged. I'm really excited about the group of people that we got and the general buy-in from this group in terms of the process that we're going to describe to you in a second, and the energy is just, it's really positive. So I think that there's going to be a lot of good outcomes. I'll talk maybe a little bit more after, but I will turn it over to Ms. Brooksbank, who has been working very hard on this.
Thank you, Mayor Richmond. That's great segue. I prepared a PowerPoint that we can just review quickly, if that's okay. I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me one moment here. Can everybody see that? Is everyone able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
No.
So with council recognizing that effective recovery and relief efforts require a really strong and collaborative approach that is informed by local governments, key organizations, and subject matter experts from within our community, the Mayor's Task Force was established as a select committee of council and with the intent of providing recommendations to council with respect to response and recovery efforts, both for the economic and social sectors. There was a lot of discussion around, you know, what the vision is for this group. And we actually kind of revisited the call for basically members to join the group. And we talked about the importance of, you know, how we're going to lean on our community as creative thinkers, how they're going to be our collective brain trust, and just the importance of working side by side with our community members. And that really resonated with the people at the table, and a lot of them said that that was the reason why they had applied. So really, ultimately, you know, the guiding star or the vision that we're sort of looking to as we go through this process is everything that we do will be with the aim of making Pemberton stronger than ever. See if I can get, sorry, just bear with me as I wonder why that won't change. Sorry about that, everybody. There we go. Okay. So as Mayor Richmond indicated, we discussed at length the process on how we would move forward. As you can imagine, collective problem solving is not easy, especially when there are such a diverse array of issues that of issues that need to be addressed and also that need to be addressed right away. So we worked with two of the Mayor's Task Force members, Jackie and Rodney, to help us develop a process in which we could quickly or rapidly identify issues and then move into problem solving. So as you can see here, the process, it starts with surfacing issues. You're probably wondering what that means, and I'm going to go into that in our next slide. But the process starts with surfacing issues, mapping the issues. So basically understanding what the root issue is. A lot of the time when people talk about some of their challenges or issues, sometimes they're actually a symptom of the problem and not actually the problem. So by mapping those issues, we have a deeper understanding of really what the root problem is, and then we have eventually greater success at solving them. So after we map the issues, we're going to assign an issue leader. And what that means is that there's a very varied, I guess, expertise at that table, and a lot of people that are very passionate about certain topics within the community. So what is going to happen is once we have an idea of what all the issues are, task force members will self-appoint themselves to an issue, and they can choose to either lead that issue, or what they could do, or they could support an issue. And then from those working groups that get created, we'll also be leaning on the community to help us a little bit with some of that problem solving, because ultimately we do have a lot of expertise at that table, but there's also people within the community that are very eager to help. There were a lot of people that did apply for the Mayor's Task Force that didn't make it, but want to be a part of the process. So we'll be leaning on those people as well. So once the working groups are developed, then we move into developing the solutions. And again, we've got Jackie, who is on the task force, who has incredible strategic planning expertise and background that's going to help us through that. And then once we've developed the solutions, then we move into the action and implementation planning. And then after that, we report on our progress, we communicate our successes, and then we kind of start again. And you'll see the reason I've used those arrows and sort of made it more of a circular process is because we're going to, actually, that's a good segue into the next thing. What we're going to do is to surface the issues, like I talked about earlier, is we're going to be asking the community a question on an online forum. And this question, and I'll get into the specifics with that very shortly, but the purpose of this question is to sort of get a quick temperature of the community to find out what some of the pressing issues are. And as you can imagine, COVID is rapidly changing. It's evolving. It's presenting new challenges every day, and some challenges sometimes just go away. So if we go back to this this chart here, so basically once we communicate success, then we'll probably go back up and revisit and see what issues there are, develop other working groups and tackle them that way. So it's not just sort of like identify 5 issues and then we're done. There'll be a continual sort of list that we'll be tackling, revisiting, and updating as we go. So back to this question. So basically what the task force is proposing to do is ask this question to the community via an online forum to have a quick understanding of what the pressing issues. So what happens is once we get the online responses, then what we're going to do as a group is we're going to cluster them, so theme them and prioritize them and share them back to the Mayor's Task Force group. And then from that's where people are going to start self-appointing themselves to those groups to start the problem solving. So one of the things that we wanted to bring to council today was to share that question with you. So you have a sense of what we're asking the community in case you get any questions. So it's quite a lengthy question. And the reason being is because we wanted to make sure that we wanted to put the question in context, but we also wanted to make sure that you know, the community understood that people are really challenged right now. They're having a really hard time. And our intent is true, and we really want to do a very good job and a quick job of starting to tackle those big issues. I'm not sure, do you want me to read the question, or has council had a chance to read it and have any questions at this point?
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to read it.
Okay, I'd be happy to read it. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a very real and lasting, consequences on our community. It has presented additional pressures on our families, our businesses, and our economy. The pandemic has forced us to physically separate ourselves from our community and supports, profoundly affecting our mental well-being and our ability to maintain our usual connectedness. Despite these enormous challenges, we have seen our community rise to the occasion with acts of kindness, empathy, and a fierce sense of responsibility for one another. Our community is well positioned to carry on these traits throughout the recovery and beyond, as we make Pemberton stronger than ever. Right now, the Mayor's Task Force has one big question, and we would love to hear from you to understand more about how you see us moving forward together. So the ultimate question is, reflecting on your experiences, how might we create a stronger community moving forward? And I think the reason initially we had sort of a question formed, and we felt that the question needed to be asked in a way that would be more of an opportunity statement. So in other words, like the response would offer more of a problem-solving response rather than just sort of a laundry list of issues. So that's sort of how we, as the task force, came up with this question. I'll maybe keep going, and then we can revisit the question if anyone has any thoughts on that. So next steps for the task force is, so it was to draft the community question with the Mayor's Task Force input. So we have done that, and that's before you. Next, what we're going to do is issue a call for responses to that community question. And then once we have about 50 responses, we'll start to cluster, theme, and analyze and prioritize the responses. We'll share those responses with the task force so they can self-assign themselves to an opportunity to work on. And then the group will work to define the problem, build a team, and then basically after that, the groups will sort of not go out on their own, well, I guess go out on their own and brainstorm solutions and create a plan. So today, the two recommendations before council with respect to my report is recommendation 1, that council receive the Mayor's Task Force on COVID-19 response and recovery update. And number 2, that council approve the Mayor's Task Force opportunities, issues identification, and problem solving process. And that council approve the community question for online response to inform the Mayor's Task Force opportunities and issues identification. Mayor Rich and I'd be happy to answer questions if you feel it's appropriate.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. Brooks-Frank. That was great. I'd like to add a little bit of context or between the lines from what I saw happening. I mean, we sort of as a group decided that we obviously want to be a very productive committee, and we don't want to get together once a month and kick some ideas around. We want action, and we felt that it was important to build a really strong process to get there rather than to try to jump into things. And that's where this process came from. So take some time at the beginning to be more productive and action oriented a little bit later. And obviously we wanted, as we've mentioned before, we wanted to make sure, the whole idea behind the question is we want to make sure this committee is doing the work of the community, and we want to hear from them. So the idea behind the subcommittees is that instead of getting together once a month, these subcommittees will go off and work on their own and produce some results to bring back to the group and hopefully keep the processes moving at a decent pace. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, there was an interesting conversation regarding the VOP's role. This is a committee of council. We're here to pass some recommendations right now. The recommendations that will be coming forward will hopefully result in some strong actions from council. But there's a recognition that this isn't, through this committee, not all the work that's going to come out of it, not all the ideas that arise are going to be things that are necessarily going to be done by the village. We sort of spoke of the task force being the conduit and Village of Pemberton being the enabler on many of these things. And then again, some will land directly on our table for action on our part. There's no question. But I feel, and the group, this is again where I felt like there's a lot of really positive buy-in and energy on this process and diving into it. Everybody seemed quite keen to tackle it, and as Jill said, go out to the community and bring in other members on these subcommittees to help do the work that we got to do. And as part of it, Jackie is, the subcommittees will be coached, so to speak, on problem-solving approaches and make sure that it's productive. So there's a lot of good little pieces already in place. I think that will make sure that all these groups and the committee as a whole will be quite effective. And again, it won't all, it'll come back to us, but many other actions will go back out to the community. So yeah, that's sort of how the evolution of this process came about. Any questions for Joe or myself?
Mayor Richmond?
Go ahead.
I see in the report that it's going to be an online questionnaire. Is that going to go out through our news that we put out every Friday, or is it going to be done through the chamber, the Tourism Pemberton, that type of thing? How's it going to be promoted?
Go ahead, Jill.
Yes, so the question will be circulated via the village's communications channels. And we've also asked each of the mayor's task force to share within their networks as well.
Great, thank you.
And so
May I
along
make
those
a
lines-
comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have obviously a representative of the seniors on this task force as well. And they raised the issue that potentially some individuals won't have electronics to be able to enter and be able to participate in this. So we looked at whether or not there could be little groups, maybe setting something up at the farmer's market or helping people individually input their questions if they don't have the ability to access, not necessarily just seniors, but also taking the approach that we want to get comments from everybody, regardless if they have a tablet or Wi-Fi or cell service or whatever that happens to be.
And we're really hoping that this remains a live process with the question, as Ms. Brooksbank said, like things will change, there's going to be concerns and opportunities that are brought forward by community members right now with the context of right now. In the fall, who knows where we're at, and more things will come up. So we're hopeful that this is a process that will be, like I say, live and ongoing and dynamic, and more will come out of it. And yeah, I think it's a really good start to something here.
Richmond?
Go ahead.
Just further to Councillor Craddock's comment about how we're going to promote it. And I was wondering if, I can't remember if I brought this up already, but will there be, will the question also be in the Peak or other newspaper outlets? Because those newspapers are free. And I wonder if some of other parts of our community just sit down and read the paper if they don't have an electronic device.
Go ahead.
At this point, we weren't going to look at any newspaper print. I think one of the challenges is that it costs to advertise and to put advertisements in the paper, and we don't have any budget allocated towards this. That doesn't mean that there won't be times when we might need some funding, but that would be brought forward as a request to council. But at this time, we hadn't considered putting an ad in the newspaper.
But at the very least, when you mentioned the farmer's market, will there be pamphlets that can be handed out at that point if there were people at the farmer's market asking this question?
On what the mayor's task force is doing, or I would say that they would be taking the survey questions
That's
from them
what
at
I
that
meant.
point. Yeah, they would be actually doing the work and getting the feedback so that they can, or someone can then actually input the data into the software or the online platform.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll move recommendation 1.
Okay, moved by Councillor Craddock, seconded by
Yeah.
Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion for recommendation 2. Council approve the mayor's task force opportunities, issues, identification, and problem-solving process. Moved by Councillor Antonelli, seconded by Councillor Zant. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, does that include the ANDAT, Ms. Fraser? You don't need a separate motion on that?
Oh, sorry, no. It's a 2-clause resolution.
Awesome. I think that's it on that. Before you go, Ms. Brooksbank, I do want to acknowledge both Nikki and efforts on this, the CEO's efforts on this, the task force committee members' efforts on this. But Ms. Brooksbank has spent a lot of energy and poured a lot of heart into it, and it really shows, and I really appreciate it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, on to Development Services Village of Pemberton Plant List 2020. I believe Ms. Reese is joining us on this.
Yes.
Give her a moment. Hello, Ms. Reese.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. The purpose of this report is to present to Council the new Village of Pemberton plant list for consideration of approval. The plant list is a reference document identified in the Development Permit Area Guidelines and is primarily used to review landscape plans submitted with development permit applications. The existing plant list from 2011 contains a number of wildlife attractants, so staff felt it was critical to review and update this list. A previous draft of the updated plant list was presented to Council on June 16th, and the report identified wildlife attractant plants that were suggested for removal. A resolution was passed to further review the following plants, including wild rose, Nootka rose, kinnikinick, and red osier dogwood as bear attractants, and provide an update to Council. Staff have reviewed all the plants that were suggested for removal from the 2011 plant list to confirm their status as bear attractants, as established by both Whistler's Bear Smart Society and the District of Squamish Wildlife Friendly Landscaping Guide. And both of these references are attached to the report as appendices. And staff review is outlined in Table 1. Plants that were considered medium or high bear attractants, including wild rose, kinnikinick, and red osier dogwood, were not included in the updated July 2020 plant list. Plants that were considered low risk or not considered bear attractants were included, such as the Nootka rose. Additionally, based on guidance from a local plant specialist who is knowledgeable in native species, a number of plants are proposed as additions, which are identified in Table 2. In conclusion, staff recommends that Council approve the Village of Pemberton plant list July 2020. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reese. Any questions or thoughts? Councillors Santinelli and Noble, I know you had thoughts on this last time. Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I think there are a few restrictions on here that I don't completely agree with, but I think it's overall a good list, and I support it.
Thank you. Councillor Noble?
Same. There's a few that don't seem that much of an attractant, but overall it's a good list.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, would somebody like to make the motion?
I'll move that.
I'll make a motion.
Seconded by, moved by Councillor Antonelli, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Reese.
Thank you. Good evening.
Bye. We don't have any bylaws tonight, so we'll go right into the mayor's report. First of all, I hope everybody enjoyed Canada Day. It was certainly a different one for us in town. I always really enjoy our Canada Day celebrations. So it was, again, different, but it was easier to swallow because it was rainy and crappy outside. So it didn't feel like we were missing out quite as much. But it was pretty interesting as well. It was a midweek, and it was right following the Phase 3 opening announcement. And we, I think, all saw a huge surge in traffic on the roads before and after the Canada Day and those weekends. Well, which leads me to the sirens that you're about to hear in the background. There was certainly a lot of traffic on the road. There was certainly some tragedy on the road, tragedies on the road that weekend. And yeah, a lot of people from out of town. Is the siren loud or should I carry on?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Fine.
And yeah, the sirens were nonstop. And as we know, our fire department was called out time after time after time. I forget the number of calls. I was talking to some of the firefighters and they told me how many calls, but certainly put a large stress on our fire department as well. It seems like the traffic is still heavy, but it's slowed a little bit, I would say, since. I think that was the big pent-up energy of, okay, it's phase 3 and people were coming out and everybody had a canoe or a boat in tow or bikes on the roof. And from what I could tell, there's still fair traffic on the roads, but it seems to have slowed a little bit. We're definitely seeing a lot of lower mainland tourists coming up as opposed to our usual, Washington State and other places. So I've spoken to lots of people on the streets who are from North Van and they're the first time in Pemberton in 30 years and they live in North Van. So it's interesting. We're seeing people from parts of BC nearby that don't usually come here. And maybe with regards to tourism, the village in partnership with Liwat, Naquatqua, Tourism Pemberton and the Chamber created what's called the Pemberton Pledge. And I believe Ms. Brooks-Banks sent it around to you guys today. But briefly, it's sort of a pledge, or it's in the form of a pledge, but it's basically suggestions or requests of how to approach tourism in general and in these times. And it covers everything from, respecting Indigenous people's lands, treading lightly, leaving the land as you found it, respecting those rules and guidelines, staying on the path and not branching off, supporting local businesses respectfully, all that sort of thing. It's being spread on social media, our social media, and there's going to be a couple signs in town, one at the visitor center and one downtown that tourists and visitors can sign on to. But I think it was a nice coordinated project to work with Naquatqua and Liwat and their tourism and chamber groups. So I think it's positive. I think it was last week, or was it just after our council meeting, we had our soccer field grant application announcement. We haven't made any splashy announcement ourselves, but the province did. They announced a number of projects in the area, and the feds, a number of projects in the area. And so, yeah, I know you guys all know, but just to be able to say it, we received over $3 million to go towards our soccer fields. It's not just a soccer field, it's a second soccer field. It's an amenities building, fencing, lighting, stands, a well so that we can irrigate without using treated water, be more ecological about it. So a huge upgrade to our rec site and really puts it on the map once this project will be done. It's a $4+ million project. Over $3 million came from the grants, and the rest, as we know, came from amenity contributions, Area C contributions from SLRD, developers and community groups. The Rotary is also generously supporting this project. So once again, I'm able to pull funds together from all over without going directly to the taxpayer and put together, I think, what's going to be a huge asset. And like I say, really put our rec site on the map and allow us to continue building it as the needs demand. Had a couple meetings with MLA Sturdy and MP Wheeler. Can't remember if my meeting with Minister Robinson was in between our last council meetings, but in any case, with those two meetings, we talked a lot about the deficit coming out of coronavirus. We talked about MP Patrick Wheeler talked about the fact that the Trans Mountain Pipeline has now cleared its last legal boundary. I don't know if everybody's aware of that. Pretty interesting. We can have a big conversation about that, I'm sure. Talked about the wage subsidy extension. That's been extended, looks like, to the end of the year at this point. So that's a big support for businesses. As we've talked about before, they're trying to get more people off of EI and CERB and into connected to jobs again and using that subsidy if necessary. And as usual, with the last couple of calls with them, I speak of some of the challenges. I talked about the roads, the traffic, and the hopes that the province would, you know, again, find jobs and put more boots on the ground to manage our campgrounds. And I spoke a lot about our daycare challenges. You know, we've talked about it here before, but I think it bears repeating. You know, with things like the DFX camp and Stewardship Pemberton and other camps canceled and our daycare closed, it's really, really impacting our families. It's impacting our businesses. It's especially impacting women who need and want to get back to work. And it's a real problem. So I've been talking, you know, I just going to keep hammering on that drum whenever I have the audience. And I'm sort of doing it on a few levels, you know, support from the province to make it easier for some of these community groups to run their camps. Keep inquiring about our grant application for our daycare expansion, and other supports for daycare. One of the biggest ones in my mind is the fact that daycare workers make a ridiculously low wage to look after our children, and that's to make that change. We need support from the province for that industry to be able to change that wage level, because it's ridiculous. So just so you know, I keep hammering away on that, and daycare is already one of the things that's been flagged on a number of occasions at our mayor's task force as a big concern and something we need to look at. I just want to fill in a couple community conversations, so to speak, that I've had just to keep you up to date, because it's all relevant stuff. I had a couple conversations about 1 Mile Lake. You may have noticed that some of the weeds were building up. And maybe I'll pass this over to the CAO in a second. You know, we've had issues around the Beaver Dam and the inflow and the outflow. Actually, I'll pass it right over to you, Nikki. Describe what we did short term and what we did in the budget.
There's a couple of different initiatives that staff have been working on, and they've actually been spending a lot of time down at the lake. So one of the things that we needed to deal with were the ongoing issue with the beavers. They like to block the outlet. So we actually have a beaver box that was installed there as well, which sort of allows, it kind of tricks the beaver, but they ended up being able to infiltrate it and block it. So it caused a double whammy, which didn't allow the lake to drain properly. So the first thing that we needed to do was to clear that. And we actually redid the beaver box. So it was more of a metal box as opposed to a wood box. So the beaver couldn't get into it very easily. And we could actually just remove the top and clean it out from what it was before. There's also a beaver dam. I'm actually also supposed to do a shout out. There's about a volunteer for sure, but maybe more, who repeatedly go down to the lake and clear this beaver dam on their own accord, just because it's a passion of theirs. So shout out to that individual who is taking that on his own. So that was step one. The other ongoing issue that we've been dealing with fisheries for a while is how we correct the intake. So staff at the end of last year and the beginning of this year have met with several representatives, as well as Stewardship Pemberton, to go down to find out how we increase the water that's coming into the lake. So it actually requires some work in a stream, and DFO is going to be the lead on it, and we're going to provide equipment and staffing resources to do this. So that's on the plan, on the docket for the fish window, which is August 1st to September 15th. So that's when we'll be getting in the first week of August to make those changes. There currently is water going into the lake. It's just not as much as we would like to see. If you're walking along the boardwalk, you can actually see the discoloration of the water that's coming out of Pemberton Creek. So staff's actual plan was to try to, there's been some conversation about the height of the water. Well, first it was extremely high when we were having a lot of the melt. And then with the removal of the dam and then the repairs to the beaver box, staff were hoping and wanting that water level to drop. So what needs to happen is the lake sort of needs to do a bit of I guess, a changeover, you want to call it. What was it? It needs to, what do we see? Anyway, it needs to turn over, I guess. It needs to get some of the stuff that you see on the top and then allow the new water to come in. And that can take actually a year. So one of the things that happens when we bring the new water in is it reduces the temperature of the lake, which then kills off the weeds. So that we are going to see that. Hopefully it'll be next year that we see that. There's not much we can do now, just because we have to wait for that fisheries window. So we will start to see some more improvements there. Just the third thing that they've been dealing with that you've probably seen are somebody has put goldfish in 1 mile, which can be, they're very invasive, especially when you have coho and other fish that this is their rearing habitat. So that with increasing the water into the lake and the colder temperatures, it further oxygenates it, which the goldfish don't like, and that will also help our goldfish issue. We're also going to be doing some other monitoring, and we are again working with experts on this to try to be able to remove the goldfish. They did do a 24-hour trapping. They didn't want to, again, impact the other fish, and they didn't catch anything. So that's a good sign, because if they started catching a lot, then we'd have a bigger goldfish issue than we thought. So having said that, I was going to do a smaller update, but I did get some additional information. There will be further details in the quarterly reports that will be coming forward on the next council meeting. So if you have any additional questions and it hasn't been answered there, feel free. Our manager, Tom Chima, will be coming to do a presentation for you then.
Thank you, Ms. Gilmore. There's also, but they had, I think it's Nita Lake or Alpha Lake, Nita Lake in Whistler. They had a huge goldfish problem for a while, and well, if ever he wants to reach out, he might want to talk to them and see if they have any thoughts. Another conversation I've had is regarding I was asked to meet and had a few conversations with a local developer in the industrial park who was questioning our DCC bylaw and the rates. You know, DCCs, as we know, are designed to help ensure that developers help keep up with the cost of development and the cost of growth, without going into more detail on that. But I just wanted to flag with you in case you guys get approached. You know, we talked through it on a number of occasions. And as I said to him, we at council will be looking at our DCC bylaw, I think in the fall. And again, I'll ask Ms. Gilmer to make sure I got my facts right. But it is on the books to look at in a couple stages. And, you know, it's the sort of bylaw that we try to keep current and updated, obviously. So I just let them know that it is coming to council. We will be reviewing it. We will make sure that it's that it reflects what we want it to reflect. So yeah, I just wanted to give you that heads up in case anybody approaches you guys. Ms. Cohen, did you want to talk to the process a little bit?
Just so everyone's aware, reviewing the DCC bylaw is quite a lengthy process, and it actually needs to be approved by the ministry. And so what we need to do as the first step, which is what we had separated it out in budget discussions, we were going to do the engineering part at the end of this year and then start the public consultation early in the new year. So we need to develop, as per ministry rules, a 20-year budget, which identifies all of the infrastructure that needs to be upgraded from our best guess on where we're at right now for development, increase in development over the years. So we also need to do costings for that. So that will be the process that we'll undertake in the beginning of the year. And then there are also small little assist factors, which means how much is the village going to contribute towards this, and how much do we want the developers to pay. So those are additional bits that we need to review as we're going through this process as well. So I imagine it would probably take, I'm going to say six to 10 months, probably all finalized. And then again, last time when we did this in 2013, we finalized it. It actually got kicked back because the ministry didn't like the assist factor that we had put in there. We said we were going to have a little percentage for grant funding, and they didn't like that. So we had to remove it and do a few extra tweaks. So I'll anticipate maybe some of that moving forward. We also tried to sit down and meet with the developers as well and just get their opinion. So if this individual would definitely be involved in the discussions as we move forward.
Thanks. On a really positive note, I've had a number of people walk up to me in the village and say how awesome our downtown looks this summer. After all the efforts and grief we went through last year, it's just nice to hear those comments, and it's nice to pass them on. There are a lot of people that appreciate it, and yeah, I think it does look great. And similarly to, I think it was just today, there was a post on Pemberton social media from, I think it's a dance studio in the industrial park, thanking us for the Friendship Trail because their kids can now ride for a half an hour to get to dance studio on their own on the trail. So nice to hear the really positive feedback. I had a conversation with Mayor Elliott from Squamish, and we were talking about the impacts of mental health from the pandemic and mental health in general. And something that they were doing down there that we were talking about that she would like to maybe extend to the whole corridor is doing a little bit of a destigmatization campaign on mental health. And maybe it's something that we could talk about again up and down the corridor and have a sort of a unified approach. So it was a very early conversation, and I said I look forward to discussing it more, but I think it could be interesting, and again it might tie back into the task force a little bit. I don't know if you saw the announcement. The paving is starting, and we are getting fresh pavement from 1 Mile Bridge to Lillooet River Bridge. I'm hoping, I don't know if we could push them a little bit. I would love to push them a little bit closer to the plateau, because when you come off that bridge at the Lillooet, the pavement's still pretty bad going north there. But that'll be great to see, because the bridge and some of the other spots are in terrible shape. So that's awesome. And for me, a couple other meetings coming up. I got SLRD next week. I can now say this in the open. We have completed the hiring process. We have hired a new CAO for the regional district. Her name is Melanie Helmer. She's got a really strong background. She's worked as a CAO in a number of places, including most recently up in Nechako and Fort St. James, I think, not St. John, St. James. Really great experience. She was instrumental in putting together the transit system on the Highway of Tears. Big player in that. So she's got really good transit experience. Very, very bright, very enthusiastic and keen to join. It looks like she just found a place in Pool Creek. So they'll be living in our area. And she'll be on board on September 8th. And so that's pretty exciting. And there's a lot of conversation with the hiring committee and then the board with the new CAO just to talk about we feel there's a higher level of cooperation than there's ever been potentially at the board and up and down the corridor and to the north. And we really hope to see that reflected in her work with our CAO and the other CAOs in the corridor. And yeah, she's just very keen to start. So I think really, really good news there. And that's it. I also have a task force meeting next week, the 27th, and we're back here on the 28th. And that's it for me.
Mayor Richmond,
Go ahead.
did you want to talk about the community forest?
Nope. Any council reports?
Hey, Richmond.
Go ahead.
So last week, Jill and I attended a Tourism Pemberton meeting where she brought up the Pemberton Pledge idea. It was well received. Some of the board members their only feedback was to just how the message was going to get out there, and she already covered that in her report today. So it looks like it's a lot of people that are going to support it and hopefully get it on their social media pages and get that message out there. In saying that, I've also had a lot of good feedback about, I know we got a letter for it, but the 1 Mile Lake Boardwalk being one way, there's a lot of people that have really appreciated that idea. And I know some people have mentioned to keep it that way when the pandemic's finished, but we've walked the boardwalk probably more times now than we have in a while, and the one way does really help a lot. So what else? One of the other things that Tourism Pemberton is working on is working with the First Nations groups and displaying some kind of like an art show going with the First Nations groups that are in our community. And that's about it for Tourism Pemberton. That's all I got today.
Thank you. Any other council reports? Go ahead.
I attended a library meeting via Zoom, and the library is opening up a little bit more these days, and the public can go in and use the computers, and they have, they're opening up a little bit more So yeah, and they were asking us if we had any insights on any capital projects or specific materials that council might have spoken about, but I just let them know that it didn't come up as a topic, anything from council, and that just to consult with the public on that.
Councilor Antonelli, are they changing the layout, or are they just limiting the number of people that go in, or how's it working?
Yeah, the layout is completely different. The public cannot browse through the stacks at the moment. You can sign up to receive books, put them on hold, and pick them up outside. So right now it's basically just people going in to access the computers with appointment.
Okay. Thank you. Any other council reports?
No, I think you covered everything, Mike.
Right. Okay. Correspondence for action. We have a couple regarding UBCM. I thought we were gonna discuss UBCM separately, Ms. Gilmore.
Well, we just received, we were waiting to hear about the 2020 UBCM provincial appointment book, and we just received that today.
So when do we have to have our meeting requests in by?
They haven't necessarily I haven't fully reviewed. We just received it at 4 o'clock today. So I don't have any details on that. The one thing that is different though, after we went to all of the trouble of preparing the briefs over the last year in particular, they don't accept them and they don't want them. They want sort of 150 characters. So it was quite challenging. But then when you look at the correspondence on today's agenda, they would like as much detail in advance of the meeting. So it's a bit of a mixed message as to how we're going to proceed. We haven't had a discussion. As you're all aware, Ms. Olson usually prepares the briefs based on the direction from council. So we haven't had an opportunity to sit down and discuss that. So we probably should be looking for some topics, although albeit we've just received this information. So
we're gonna run into timeline. Like, I don't want to have a fragmented conversation on it and start, just pulling things out of the air. I don't know if council has any strong or any suggestions they want to make at this point. We could absolutely do that to start the process. If not, I feel like we need to have maybe a bigger conversation about any ministers' meetings we want to have. What's the thoughts from the rest of you?
Are you just going to say August 4th there?
Yeah, August
Okay.
4th, and then for the provincial government staff, other ministries, agencies, commissions is August 31st for the requests.
So we could potentially put our thinking caps on, come back to our July 28th meeting, have a conversation about what minister meetings we want to have Ms. Olson on hand. And then we wouldn't be able to, oh no, there's no brief, so we don't
There's no
need
briefs.
Right.
We would just need some, the general, what
Yeah.
you would like to meet the minister regarding. I would assume maybe daycare or something along those lines. And just, it was very, very short, the amount of room that she had to put in the details.
So, I mean, again, why don't we, if anybody wants to float high level, some thoughts about minister meetings or conversations around ministers meetings, we could float them right now. And then otherwise, are we comfortable? I got you right now. Are we comfortable coming back to July 28th and having a bigger conversation with Ms. Olson in the room? Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Zant.
All I wanted to mention too is that when you mentioned about which ministers to meet with, is through the mayor's task force would be a good way to get some of those questions out as well. And something to bring up as well, maybe at the task force to say, hey, we've got these meetings to set up with UBCM. Maybe we take some of those questions back to UBCM as well, bring in the council and back to UBCM.
We might be able to, walk some of these ideas in, so to speak, but we meet with the task force on the 27th. We then meet as a council on the 28th, and these requests have to be in by August 4th. So we could see if anything comes out of our July 27th meeting, but I don't think we really have the time to turn it around and have a conversation like we would have here.
Okay.
A couple quick thoughts that jump to my mind are something around daycare. The other one is, I think I'd like to see Ms. Gilmore talk to Mr. Clark at the PVDD to see if there's some advocacy we want to do there. You know, we've talked about the seismic requirements on some of the dike upgrades. You know, Mr. Clark said to me on a couple of occasions that he finds the requirements around statutory right-of-ways to do some of the work on dikes very restrictive, and there was some advocacy to be done there. So I'm wondering if that's one topic we could look at on July 28th and maybe get a little bit of info from Mr. Clark. So those are the two things that jump to my mind right away. Anybody else?
Mayor Richmond?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add in, if we could, we've got the group looking at housing for seniors, an extension of the Lions Club. I would certainly like to have that as a discussion point.
Okay, perfect.
Mayor Richmond?
Go ahead.
Well, the thing I've been thinking about as well is I know Tourism Pemberton's been pushing for the MRDT and looking at those, that document, the regulations behind having to attain the MRDT. I'm wondering if we could advocate for them to maybe relax the rules a little bit or change them so it might make it a little bit easier for Tourism Pemberton to apply.
Let's put it on the list to discuss. I'm not sure how that looks, but absolutely let's.
That's all I was going for.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like there's, you know, we should just earmark either Destination BC or tourism or parks, again, to talk about parks and tourism in the area. We could talk about whether it's a redundant meeting or we want to do it, but let's maybe put it on the list for discussion for July 28th. Go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
Today, Ms. Gilmore referred to a package of information that we received from from UBCM about the province about the ministry books, and what it does is it breaks down all of the ministries and then the various areas of discussion or topics that you would cover with each one of those ministers. So council may find that document, and we'll include it on the next agenda package, quite helpful, because it will help sort of steer who you need to talk to about what issue. So I think it will come in helpful to determine.
Perfect. I've got sirens and coyotes going. Zoom and Pemberton, you gotta love it. Okay, anything else we want to float out there for discussion on July 28th? Okay, well, if you think of anything else, you could always send it around via email just to give staff a little heads up if we need any information. Otherwise, you could bring it forward on July 28th. And we could put some meetings together. Do we want a resolution to bring all those back to July 28th, Ms. Fraser?
If you'd like to, I've got seniors housing, daycare, advocacy with the PVDD with respect to seismic requirements, MRDT.
I would just go tourism and
Tourism?
tourism in general and just leave it wide open.
Okay.
And that might leak into parks or Flynn Road. I don't know. We'll see what council's conversation sounds like. Okay. Moved by
Yeah.
Ryan?
Second by Ryan. On favor, opposed, motion carries. Crazy here. It sounds like the neighborhood I grew up in. So, does that, so that will include a conversation as to whether we want to meet with Premier Horgan then? Do you need more direction on that?
Yeah, I think we can discuss where at the meeting, whether it's a minister and the premier, and then we can have that conversation.
And I think the document that they've provided will help you in terms of narrowing down who you want to meet with or who would be best to meet with.
Perfect. Okay, correspondence for information. We have 3. Does anybody want to pull any up?
Do we want to receive those 2 letters or
Yes.
defer them to the next meeting?
I thought we made a motion to bring them back to the next meeting.
Not the letters, but
Oh,
it
okay.
was a resolution to bring back the items for consideration of minister meetings, but we haven't done anything with the actual letters.
Okay, so let's just get a motion to bring these letters back to the July 28th meeting. Moved by
Yeah.
Councilor Noble. In favor, opposed, motion carries. Correspondence for information, there are 3. Anybody want to pull anything up?
Move to receive and file.
Second.
Second by Councilor Zant. All in favor, Opposed, motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, notice of motion. Question period. And I just got to get back to my notes. Do we have folks on the line, Ellie?
Yeah, I see there's Dan Falloon has his hand up.
So just quickly, for those in attendance who wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify village staff that you would like to ask a question. Village staff will announce your name, and when it is your turn, you will be prompted to unmute your microphone. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to the business discussed during the council meeting are permitted. Okay. Mr. Falloon.
Hi there, how's everyone?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Just had a couple quick clarifications regarding the BC Transit decision here. When the reserves are going into shared expenses, what exactly are shared expenses? What's it being transferred to?
Ms. Gilmore, you want to take that?
Yes. So shared expenses, there is a combination of funding that comes from the province, and it comes from the municipality, and dollars come in from the fare box. So it's a 54, I always get this, 54, 46, something along those lines, percentage of share that each group's, the local government being the municipality and the provincial government puts in. Anything collected at the fare box offsets the municipal's portion towards the cost of operating the service. So that's what they talk about with shared.
Oh, perfect, thanks. And just the other thing I want to clarify, the AOA has not yet been received yet, that's still to come?
That's correct.
Any indication when that might be received?
I would say quite soon. I know that they would like this information back from us by the 17th, so probably the next couple weeks after that. I'm certain they would want to get us in August sometime, I believe.
Perfect, that's good for me, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Is there anybody else, Ellie?
No, that was it.
Okay. Then I will look for a motion to go in camera.
Motion to go on camera.
Councillor Zan, second by Councillor Antonelli. On favor, opposed, we'll go in camera.
We're back on.
Hey, one thing I failed to mention in my mayor's report too is that the speed review is underway right now for, well, basically the Emerald to Mount Currie, I believe, is the whole thing, but especially our corridor from 1 Mile Lake to Mount Currie. So remember the conversation from months ago that we made that request as council. So it is actually underway as we speak.
Good.
Great.
Motion to adjourn, I guess.
Yep.
Right.
Second.
All in favor, opposed, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Ready? Thank you.
Bye-bye.